Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
Welcome to the open door. I have left an open door before you, which no one can close. Open to the love of God. Open to joining His stream of love for others. And with us today, we have quite a group. Beginning with, we have Dr. Rhonda Chervin, a former theology professor and Catholic writer who lives in Corpus Christi, Texas. And also in Corpus Christi is Commander Al. And you have a guest today. Maybe you could introduce Al.
Yes, I will. Donna Stockwell is here in Corpus Christi as well. I thought we had the panel stacked for Corpus Christi until we got another guest come in.
Okay. And I want to say this about Commander Al. Commander Al Hughes, Colonel in the Air Force, a married father who converted to the church from being an agnostic, and also has degrees in engineering and in pastoral studies. And then we have the head honcho of our panel, our group get-together, our group, Dr. Jim Hannock from Los Angeles, philosophy professor, father of 5 children, pro-life activist, and editor at New Oxford Review. Welcome, Jim, and you have a guest today, too.
Yes, I would like to welcome Desmond Silvera, who happens to be a member of the National Committee of the American Solidarity Party. And to offset a bit the Corpus Christi crew, Desmond is also from SoCal, that is to say Southern California, in particular Chino Hills.
All right, Jim, I think we're ready to go.
Let's start with our usual format. I'm going to read a short introduction paragraph from the Religion in the Public Square plank of the American Solidarity Party. And we can then comment on that short introduction paragraph. And it just so happens that underneath this paragraph, as I look at it, there are only 2 bullet points, but both of them are very important. And then, whenever it seems appropriate, we can do some application work. We can apply this material from the platform of the American Solidarity Party to a recent development, a worrisome development. That is to say, if people aren't familiar with it, the challenging of Amy Coney Barrett, a Notre Dame law school professor, whose name has been put forward as a nominee to a federal appeals court that's based in Cincinnati, Ohio, Chicago, so the Midwest area. She's been challenged on the basis of her Catholic beliefs by senators of the United States of America. That's our country. At any rate, we'll want to look at that because the challenges bear directly on religion in the public square. Let me begin, though, as I said, with this introductory paragraph. As a Christian Democratic Party, and that term reflects our lineage with the Christian Democratic parties in Europe, and Latin America, of course. As a Christian Democratic Party, we affirm that religious values have played an important role in the history and culture of the United States of America. We also recognize that many of the earliest American settlers were persecuted religious minorities, and respect the long history of religious liberty that has been an essential component of our national identity. Now, we've all looked at that paragraph, and it might seem a little awkward to restate it, but I'm sure that the great majority of our listeners have not. So let me state it one more time. As a Christian Democratic Party, we affirm that religious values have played an important role in the history and culture of the United States of America. We also recognize that many of the earliest American settlers were persecuted religious minorities, and respect the long history of religious liberty that has been an essential component of our national identity. So that's quite a bit already. Any comments, panel? Three, two.
Well, it's just a statement of the obvious history of the country. Certainly more could be said, but I think it pretty well covers the waterfront.
Well, I spend my time, I'm a retired professor, for those who don't know me. This is Rhonda. And I have all this spare time, so I look at these things, and since I was a philosophy professor, I'm always looking for inconsistencies in the general statement because they just come to mind because that's part of my training. So I look at this thing and I think, is the Church of Satan a persecuted religious minority? Would we want to guarantee the freedom of the Church of Satan to eventually, now has, they estimate, at least 10,000 members? And should some of them be put up as judges? So things like that occur to me. What I'm really saying is it's a little vague. When the country was first founded, even though there were plenty of anti-Catholics, and Catholics were persecuted religious minorities by non-Catholics who, et cetera, there was also slavery on the basis of the Bible says that there were slaves, that if you treat them well, it's okay, and all this kind of thing. But aside from those type of issues, most of the people who signed who put together the Constitution agreed on natural law. See, so they weren't thinking you could have judges that thought it was fine to chop up babies in the womb by abortion. They didn't have people like this around and so forth. So it seems to me, given how polarized our country is now on some of the biggest natural law issues, how could you not expect the people who think of Catholics as like Nazis in their mind aren't going to try to keep a Catholic pro-life judge off the seat? And how can what we are saying, in view of all these, miserable convolutions that I just suggested, does the statement, what I'm asking, does the statement, the platform in general, does it have to, even though the platform says that we're pro-life, okay, the platform says that, but it doesn't relate it to this kind of thing?
Yeah, Al, I think what I'm hearing is Rhonda suggesting that maybe the platform should be written on the basis of natural law, not on the basis of politics.
Well, it's you're trying to. We are. I joined the party, by the way, because I see what it stands for, especially the consistent consistent life position of the party. But I'm thinking that somehow the way it's written, it sounds so idealistic that it doesn't sound real when you talk about the actual situation that's going on presently.
It's not a good thing ordinarily to call on people when they don't expect to be called on. But I'll do it anyway. Desmond, you have the keenest sense of the history of the party and how the party is developed, and I know you're what should I say, engaged, very much engaged in this question of the treatment of these prospective judges. And Rhonda has raised the question of whether or not we don't have to acknowledge that some religions themselves need to be challenged. And some people might think that the Catholic Church needs to be challenged. And so how are we to address those questions?
I guess the way that I see it is that freedom to live one's values, one's religion, is part of our nation's it's DNA. Our nation was built on liberty, and I don't think that individuals should be pressured to conform in ways that violate their legitimately deeply held religious values. And Dr. Rhonda brought up the issue of, well, are Satanists protected and issues like that. That's a tougher one. I do think that if they want to hold their values and such that it doesn't push their values on others, I think that should be protected by law as well.
Okay, so different Christians. Let's just pursue this for one more minute, then I'll be quiet. But so Christian bodies who, for instance, not now but eventually, would declare that being pro-choice, quote, is part of compassionate Christianity. So such bodies can pursue their religious beliefs. So they say religion is not just worship, it's also the morality of the religion, right?
Yes.
So we would be wrong if we would ever try to put pressure not to put a judge into the Supreme Court who, say, is pro-choice, such as the famous Brennan, who's mentioned in this some of the articles that we read.
Who Rhonda picketed many years ago. Do you recall?
Yes, I certainly recall that always.
And this was when he was being honored at a faux Jesuit institution whose name shall not be mentioned here. Well, let me make a point then, just briefly, and then we can continue. In the current legislation having to do with religious freedom, and I think this is something that's circa 1992, the position of the government is that there shall be no infringement of religious liberty unless actions based on religion violate some law of the land. So if the Church of Satan says that 3 people must be picked at random and burned in a public square in honor of Satan, sorry, that's a violation of fundamental rights, and that expression of religion can't be allowed for. So there's already a distinction, which I think is ultimately based on natural law broadly conceived, that is to say right reason in acting, that says we have freedom of religion, and there cannot be any infringement on freedom of religion unless the actor, the religious actor, is violating some law, in which case we can. But even then, there ought to be the least stringent possible restriction on the religious agent. So if Native Americans in some religious group want to smoke peyote, they can. This isn't going to affect other people, and it's not something that affects the larger community, and so they ought to be allowed to do so. So what's going on in the vetting of the justices is the claim that since you are a Catholic, and since you as a Catholic are opposed to abortion, and since you as a Catholic are opposed to capital punishment, we have to ask you whether or not you'll be willing to rule impartially on laws bearing on abortion and capital punishment and, let's say, state of California, euphemism, physician-assisted suicide. So I think there's a way to screen out and distinguish between truly peripheral, irrational religious actions and religious actions that themselves are in conformity with natural law.
So an Operation Rescue person who blocks the door, because of this idea, since it's against the law to block the door of the abortion clinic, it's fine that he goes to jail?
As things stand, yes, he goes to jail. I think the law itself is a bogus law. I think that takes us to a further stage in the discussion. To what extent is a law on the books actually a law? However, such a person as that is not being vetted for a court position, and that action isn't something that really comes into play with these judicial hearings.
I'm sorry. I would agree with that it's a very different standard. A person that's blocking the door is engaging in civil disobedience, but that is as a private citizen, whereas a person that is being nominated for federal judgeship has a higher standard. My understanding is that Amy Barrett, the judge being considered, she wasn't suggesting that her values should in any way overrule law, but more so that a judge who has these firmly held values should be able to recuse themselves. And my understanding is that that's why Senator Feinstein, that's what Senator Feinstein took objection to.
Al, it's back in your court.
Who, me? All right, I think I can just what bothered me about this whole short thing that I've got it here on my screen is when you get into the platforms themselves, and there are only two of them, both of them sound like motherhood and apple pie to me, and I think there's so much more that could have been written. In my habit of criticizing the platform in general, I think my criticism this time is that they simply haven't gone far enough with what could have been maybe 3 or 4 or 5 good bullets that really hit hard.
But you don't have a direct comment on the Amy Barrett hearing case.
No, it just came to my attention yesterday, and I don't have any of the details on it, except it makes me angry that such a thing should even be, she should even be challenged. But that's the America we live in right now.
I might be bouncing around too much, but I like to follow the thread, as we say, of the conversation. One thing, Desmond, that Commander Al has often said is that the platform isn't forthright enough. And although he's just come upon, because he's put off his homework, and this isn't the first case, although he's just come upon the Amy Barrett controversy, his reaction to what happened is anger. And now, you've had some experience in platform drafting and what to leave out and what to put in. How might some of your experiences connect with how blunt the platform should be, how often it should make natural law, foundational claims, and so forth?
So in this past 2017 convention, I wasn't on the platform committee, but back in 2016 at its convention, when all members were engaged in constructing or amending or modifying the platform.
So you panel, you see, this party is so new that Desmond has to make a distinction between this year and way back last year. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my philosophy was that we needed to grow the party, so we didn't want to be too specific. There are many truths that I believe the vast majority of the people in the party adhere to, but we didn't want to get too specific, because the more specific you get, the more potential there is to turn off others. And I think that's one of the continuing conversations that's being had to this day about how specific we want to get to draw people in or to leave people out.
Would you say, Desmond, that the party platform is already specific enough, already related to foundational teachings of natural law in a specific enough way that no national figure associated with the Republican Party and no national figure associated with the Democratic Party would even remotely consider running on it? And doesn't that show that we're staking out in a very strong way a clear enough position?
So I do definitely think that we have a clear enough position. I think we are specific enough. I wouldn't necessarily say that no national Republican or Democrat would consider us because of our platform.
Publicly. I think privately, yeah, but publicly?
Yeah, agreed. Publicly, I don't think it would be due to our platform. I think more so it would be due to the fact that we're a third party and they don't want to commit political suicide. But I think that as we grow, there will certainly be politicians that are willing to consider affiliation or membership with us, because there are certainly politicians that have similar values to us on both sides of the aisle.
But could you mention a couple?
Well, so on the Democrat side, I know that we had discussed within the party, we had discussed a potential endorsement for a politician named, I believe his name is Dan Lipinski. He's pro-life and stands up against his party when it comes to abortion, but he has many of our he shares many of our issues on economics, and on the Republican side, I don't think there were any potential endorsements that we discussed, but we did discuss how politicians like Marco Rubio or John Kasich,
or our friend from Nebraska.
Who is that?
Sassy.
Okay, so they don't necessarily jive with our platform very closely, but I think that if we were, not that this is the case, but if we were equal in size to the other parties, I think that they would strongly consider us because they're more moderate people.
Okay, Commander L, does that sound weaselly to you, or does it sound commonsensical and prudential?
Well, it depends. If you're speaking from the political sphere, the platform is written wonderfully well because it's vague enough that almost anybody can find a home in it. And that's what politicians do to gain, hopefully to gain majorities. The other approach, which I've kind of beat the drum for, is to stop playing politics and get back to the core beliefs that you really are trying to support, and that would be by naming yourself what you are and not trying to use a pseudonym like Solidarity. And second of all, stop all of the vagueness of your platforms and hit it hard exactly who you are and what you want. That will guarantee you a smaller party, but at least you'll be honest about it. So those are the two alternatives I see.
When you talk about naming, what did you have in mind?
Well, that in itself is difficult. I don't know. I'd love to see a Catholic party of the Catholic Republic or something like that, but we're not going to see that.
So the party used to be called Christian Democracy USA.
Yes. Well, that's closer.
It certainly is closer, but I think from a marketing perspective, it's not as good of a name because, especially here in America, most people aren't familiar with the ideology of Christian democracy,
right,
and they tend to think that Christian Democrats are Christian members of the Democratic Party. And
I agree with you. If I heard that title, I would think, they're like European socialists.
Yeah. So I think it turned out to be bad just because of Americans' knowledge of the movement. And as far as, you talked about potentially having Catholic in the name. I personally don't think that we can achieve any political gains, accomplish anything on the agenda without an alliance from non-Catholics. I think that the number of people that would be drawn to a Catholic party wouldn't really be enough to do anything. And
I understand. I understand that dilemma, and I appreciate it. But way back at the beginning, which was 4 or 5 weeks ago, when we started the platform discussion, I wound up a gadfly right off the bat, and so I'm still playing the game of the gadfly.
Yeah.
But seriously so. Are we there?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
That sounds like a telephone.
Yeah, that's a telephone.
might have to do with Jim getting into that car.
You there, Jim?
Well, remember that our leader, Jim Hannock, had to go somewhere after, and he would spend 3 minutes leaving the radio show, not talking as he got into the car and then take it up again. So this is probably that moment.
Yeah. Okay. Did we lose our guest?
I don't think so.
Donna? No, I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, Donna.
I had a little glitch here. I'm back on.
Okay.
I was going to say, unless you've already picked up the thread here, I was going to say that it might be a little bit too early, but we do have a guest who said she was curious. I wonder if the guest who is curious would have a comment at this point.
I think you would accuse me of not doing my homework. I think I have a lot more research to do.
Well, let me ask you something that you've already done the research on. Have you been thinking about how it is you could find your way in the political jungle of our time? Or
yes,
have you been
and it's
happily Republican
still,
or happily Democrat or happily Libertarian, or you've been miserably wandering?
I'm not happily any of those. However, I am a registered Republican, but I find politics to be frustrating and an enigma.
How is it, do you suppose, that there could be a breakthrough that, among other things, would take the form of a distinctive political party? Would you say it's impossible, or that it is possible? And if it is possible, what sorts of characteristics might it have?
Oh, my goodness. Characteristics, I'll table that for the time being. I think it would be an uphill battle. I think you would need lots of money to educate people. I think you need to target a certain group and then expand from there. You've got a lot of work to do.
Is that true, Desmond? Is that true?
So,
we've got a lot of work to do?
yes, a huge, huge amount of work to do.
But we have a lot of money, right?
No, we have almost no money. But
I'm sorry, am I too blunt?
No, not at all. You should see what comments are exchanged on our Facebook. We have so many comments exchanged on our Facebook that we have to have moderators, not just a moderator, but we have to have moderators, and then we have forthright and candid exchanges about how moderate the moderators are. So it's impossible to be too blunt.
So I would dispute the assertion that there's a lot of money that's needed. Of course, the more money, the more you can do. But we've gotten to where we are not because of people donating, but because of feet on the ground. We have a lot of people that have stepped up and volunteered to help the party get started, and I personally think that that's more valuable than the money. The money certainly helps in many ways because there are expenses for running our website and
educational tools.
Marketing, yes, legal help and stuff like that. And we use that money wisely. But I think more than anything else, we need people to help out, to step up into leadership positions, and to contribute in those grassroots ways.
Where have our people been coming from, Desmond?
What do you mean by that?
Have they been coming from Democrats, Republicans, independents, from schools, from particular professions, from particular parts of the country. What's been bringing in people?
So that's an excellent question. I love data. So that's something.
Wonk! He's wonk.
Yeah, that's something I know quite a bit about. So last year, during the election season, I think more people were disappointed with Trump than with Hillary, or more Republicans were disappointed with Trump than Democrats were with Hillary. So although we were drawing plenty of people from both sides, I think that we tended to get more Republicans, disenfranchised Republicans joining the party. Post-election, I think it flipped, where more people were disappointed with Hillary than with Trump. More Democrats were disappointed with Hillary, and we started getting more former Democrats. That's anecdotal. I don't have hard data to prove that, but that's my feeling.
Do you have the sense that these people have already been, in many cases, fairly active politically, or do you have the sense that maybe they read their way into the party or talked their way into the party and are newcomers to being active?
Most of the people that have joined have been pretty politically, well, I shouldn't necessarily say politically involved, but politically educated, or knowledgeable. They know what's going on, and they haven't just wandered in. There's a lot of people from academia, a lot of nerds, professionals, and we have engineers and lawyers and doctors, people that pay attention to what's going on and have wanted to find something different than what has already existed. Now, having said that, in order to help out, a person doesn't need to be a professional. Within our state leadership, we have a huge range of people, including homemakers, nurses, fast food workers. Everyone helps out. Everyone is welcome and appreciated. There's a lot to do, and we have quite a bit of diversity, profession-wise, when it comes to those helping out.
And how does that sound? How does that sound to our guest, our special inquiring, honest inquiring person guest?
Boy, you guys are putting me on the spot. Grassroots campaign, in my opinion, grassroots campaigns, they're wonderful, and if you can get it, the movement broad enough, it's great. However, I take task with the fact that the money is not important, because how do you get the word out? You have to publish educational tools. You have to, advertising on TV is not cheap, and I don't think you can get PSAs. I think you got a long way to go. What is the membership base of this party?
So I always talk about focus on our growth rate, but I'll be honest, we are a tiny party. June of 2016, we were 200 people. By the election, we were 2,000 people. We've been doubling. We had been doubling in size every month. Right now, we're after the election, we slowed down a bit. We're at around 3,000 people. I think that by the 2018 election, I'm hoping we can be around 10,000, and then maybe in 2020 start doubling every month again, because I think it'll, again, be a contentious election. We have a long way to go. This isn't going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be years, perhaps decades, before we are competitive with even other third parties like the Libertarians or Greens, but you've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Let me shift now to a more theoretical question. It seems to me that political parties, broadly understood, are themselves grounded in Thomistic natural law thinking. And here's how the connection might be made. Thomas speaks of what we might call basic goods or fundamental human goods or core goods of the human nature, such that without these goods being realized, we can't flourish. And one of these goods specifically mentioned is friendship, and in discussing friendship, there's a specific discussion given to what we call civic friendship. And civic friendship involves a unity of people who share common goals, who embrace common means to achieve those goals, who have as the organizing principle of those goals the common good. And that, in our time, I think, translates into an organized political effort. Now, the very word political is tainted, but I can't think of many words that aren't historically tainted. So if it's the case that human beings can flourish, can become as fully what they are as their potential allows them to become, we have to have a civic order, and there has to be specific attention given to the structures of that civic order. And I don't think a think tank will cut it, and I don't think any professional organization, say the Chamber of Commerce or the American Association of University Professors, I don't think any of these merely professional associations can even structurally address the entire common good. I think that's necessarily the task of the political worker. And it seems to me that we can't say, well, let's forget about politics until everybody is reformed, because that is never, ever going to happen. After all, Scripture tells us that the just man falls 7 times daily, and we all need to be forgiven more than 70 times. So it seems to me there's a natural law foundation and even a scriptural foundation for political effort. And when I think of how frustrating it can be, all I need to do is to turn on the television and see how grotesquely abhorrent the current alternatives are. It's, I think, a Christian work of mercy to try to give some sort of sanity to the political order. And with that, my speech ends.
I wonder,
you? Al, have I converted you?
I was going to say bravo, but that's over the top, too.
no, that was very well described. My question is this. Given that, would you say that most Americans, without knowing the word, believe in natural law versus utilitarianism? Because the arguments against the different things in the platform on either side, the Republican or Democratic Party, are usually based on a utilitarian rather than a natural law ethics. And how do we overcome that?
I think that most Americans believe in the core principles of natural law insofar as they are affected by the actions of others. I think most Americans do not want to systematically be lied to. I think most Americans seek some sort of family life that isn't eaten away by other factors. I think most Americans have a basic respect for other people. I think most Americans recognize some sort of objective moral order in which reasons need to be given for making moral judgments. And most broadly considered, that's what natural law is. Now, it becomes much more than that when we ask questions like, how does it come to be that there is an objective moral order? How does it come to be that we expect other people rightly to give reasons for what they do when what they do affects themselves in a fundamental way and affects others? And then I think we push to a deeper level. And of course, Thomas tells us that ultimately natural law is our way of participating in the eternal law of God. And the eternal law of God structures the moral order, it structures the natural order, and insofar as we're intelligent and free, we can participate in that, and that's what it's all about. But the cutting edge of natural law is, you did this, and it hurt. Why? How can you justify that? And if somebody says, wah, 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 we want to say, no, you're going to have to do way better than that. And if somebody says, because it makes me feel good, well, we might do things because it makes us feel good. But if somebody says, I did that to you because it made me feel good, I think we know intellectually that that doesn't give any justification at all. And if parties are built on self-aggrandizement and making the world a world easier to become rich in, and nothing more than that, I think we know that something is basically rotten.
Gee, Jim, you ought to be a professor or something.
Yeah, well, at that time I noticed that half the class is asleep, heads forward for half of that half, and the other half of that half, their heads are back. They're so asleep, their heads have fallen backwards.
Yeah, maybe you should be the head of the party.
No. So Desmond, do you think that there is such a thing as a fundamental, this is what decent people can expect of each other, and they can ask each other for grounds for their actions, a broad sense of morality is ultimately based on reason and respect? Do you think we have enough of that in our society to support a party?
Who are you asking?
Yes, right?
I personally don't think the answer would be yes. I think currently it would be no, but I think we should be working towards that, and that's what the American Solidarity Party is working towards, increasing respect among people, increasing sense of the common good, and a sense of solidarity.
Okay, Rhonda, your turn.
Well, first
now,
of all,
you can't say that Desmond is a cockeyed idealist, right?
No, I like what he said very much.
He doesn't agree with my minimum decency.
As of now, see, because hedonism is not the same as utilitarianism. So your reductio there was based on defining utilitarianism as hedonism. So most people would agree you can't give as a reason for why you do something that it just gives you more pleasure. But they would say, but if it's for the greater good, so the pro-abortion people argue it's for the greater good that these unwanted babies coming and, blah, 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 that these unwanted babies are going to suffer for 70 years, it's better you cut them off now. So that's utilitarian rather than hedonistic. Well, they both go together, but I mean, that's I wanted to talk about something else, though. As far as I know, in the platform thus far as we've been reading it, this is the first time you mentioned Christian. And I'm thinking about, since I'm a Jewish convert, and the Jews I was brought up with were all atheists, but there are plenty of Jews who are natural law people.
Happy Rosh Hashanah.
Right, and so with these people who are natural law Jews, they're obviously going to feel, well, I can't join a party that calls itself Christian.
Sorry, I think that's where the name change from Christian Democracy USA to the American Solidarity Party is relevant, because Christian democracy isn't necessarily just for Christians. It's a set of values that are compatible with Christianity, but it's really based on natural law. But because of the confusion there, that confusion is very widespread. That was the motivation to change the name to something a little less confusing.
Right, I understand that, but here in the platform you say, since we are a Christian Democratic Party, it's right in the platform here.
Right in this Religion in the Public Square plank, it begins as a Christian Democratic Party. Well, so the platform itself is not always, what should we say, together with itself to the extent that we're going to speak clearly about Christian background and not. And Al, for one, would like much more, and Rhonda points out, I think rightly, that there's a fundamental problem there.
Well, the party is open to all. We have actively reached out to non-Christians with the effort to diversify the party. The phrase Christian democracy in there doesn't necessarily refer to a religious test, but more so refers to the fact that the values of the party are rooted in Christian tradition, Christian values. As long as anyone holds these values, and we've found many non-Christians do hold these values, they're welcome into the party.
Yeah, Al, I think Rhonda has a point there. The use of the word Christian, I understand what you're saying, but a lot of people who aren't talking to you will see Christian and immediately say, "Oh no, that's not for me." Somehow you need to sanitize. I'm almost talking against myself now, but you somehow have to sanitize it if you're trying to get the broadest possible membership.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why we stopped using Christian democracy in our marketing, and I personally advocate using the word solidarism, which is essentially the same values, but it doesn't have any type of religious connotation.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, but it ends in an ism. Can I backtrack, because I know we're running short now on time? Can I backtrack to Rhonda's distinguishing between utilitarianism and hedonism? And this is teacher talk, so bear with me. If anyone ever was a utilitarian, it was John Stuart Mill, right?
Yes.
And Mill says, what's utility? Well, it's the greatest happiness principle. And then he says, and this is within the first 2 paragraphs of his booklet on utilitarianism, he says, if somebody asks me what happiness is, I'll say it's pleasure. And what unhappiness is, I'll say it's pain. Now, when he talks about pleasure, he's not talking simply about sensations. He's talking about pleasure in a broader sense, a kind of Epicurean sense of pleasure. But we need to, that said, we need to make a distinction between the majority good and the common good. The common good includes everyone without exception, whereas the majority good might be construed by a utilitarian as eliminating some to help a greater number. And I think that's currently what's going on in a lot of so-called bioethical decisions. Great, revolting, disgusting, abhorrent example is Iceland actually bragging about having almost eliminated all Down syndrome babies. And they take this to be a bragging point. And of course, and this connects with what you're saying, Rhonda, we've purified our people. I mean, we're not going to have to deal with that problem. And if you could have all people free of Down syndrome, wouldn't that be great? And so we're going to scientifically intervene in such a way as to do that. But that's not the common good. The common good includes Down syndrome people. It doesn't exclude them and then boast about it.
Yeah, that's if you define the human person as having this kind of spiritual value. If the human person is just an id with bodily cells around it, etc., 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 if you're a total materialist, no one has any value to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's why, if you try to eliminate the religious thing and just do natural law on its own, what is natural law for a total materialist is so inconsistent that it just doesn't work.
Yeah. In doing politics, there will be no escape from doing theology. There will be no escape from doing core philosophy. It's not as if we do politics and somehow that does an end run around these issues. By no means. Interesting thing, and I know we're very close to closing here. I'm doing a paper for the International American Maritime Association on human rights. And one of the foremost historians of human rights is a fellow named Samuel Moyne. And I've been listening to some of his podcasts, and in one of them, he refers to Catholic sources for human rights language. And he says, I'm not making this up, I just heard it yesterday. He says, and frequent references are made to the so-called human person.
Beautiful. See, that's what I mean.
And this fellow is at Harvard, and he's probably the best-known historian of human rights. And one of the things that he's doing, and he thinks he's very magnanimous in this, is say, now we today use human rights as secular progressives, but learning a little history never hurts. And here's how that language first came to be used in the United Nations, among other places. And then he says, we, of course, have a very different view of it, but it's always good to know about history and the so-called human person.
Well, of course, the Jews persecute religious persecution. They think immediately of Christian and Islamic persecution of the Jews. They don't think of persecution of Christians.
Yeah. Around equal opportunity.
Going right along.
Yeah, Jim, if I can get in.
Sorry, but we're out of time.
Yeah, Jim, let me, Al, let me thank my guest, Donna Stockwell, for joining us and for subjecting herself to unanticipated questions.
Wow.
And, it was good to have her with us.
especially in Desmond, who had to give us a lot of background in wonkishness.
I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you.
Well,
So,
we'll be back next week, same time, same station, with our program. And that was an exciting one today. We certainly had a lot of different views. So thank you very much. And between now and next week, may God bless us, protect us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen.
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 We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.